You just gave me 40 years. You just gave me 40 years. Well, guess what? Sir, no citizen, no citizen.
April 21st, 2014. A gang member on trial, Sayel Angala, attacked a witness at the stand with a pen. In response, the U.S. Marshal took out his gun and shot him dead, right there in the courtroom. That's just one example of extremely bizarre moments that have occurred in the crucible of justice. Here are the 15 most insane courtroom moments of all time. Number 15. Eston Carpio.
Await the suspect's arrival.
April 17th, 2005. Esteban was being questioned by Providence Police Detective James L. Allen and another detective for the brutal stabbing of an 85-year-old woman, Madeline Gatta. However, when the second detective left the third-floor interview room to retrieve some water for Mr. Carpio, Esteban seized that opportunity to plan his escape. He overpowered Allen, took his gun, and shot him twice to kill him. Keep in mind that this event occurred at the police HQ in Providence, Rhode Island, meaning there were cops everywhere. After killing that cop, Esteban jumped through the third-floor window of that building, landing on the ground while sustaining some injuries. But ultimately, he escaped. Allen was a 27-year-old vet and beloved police officer at the department. On the flip side, a massive manhunt was in play to find Esteban at any cost. He was eventually found nearly an hour after his bold escape and was taken back to the police department for questioning. And this is the point where things took another disturbing turn. April 18th, 2005. The police chief, a few of Allen's colleagues, and Esteban's family were gathered in court for his arraignment hearing. But the moment he walked through the door, everyone's jaw dropped. It was simply the most horrific and traumatizing thing anyone could lay their eyes upon. Esteban was forced to wear a spit guard mask with his eyes, cheeks, forehead, and cranial region battered and bruised, red and swollen. His family cried out upon seeing him, claiming that the police had beaten him to a pulp as retaliation for Allen's death. And you can't blame him for thinking that way. How does a man go from this to this overnight? He was barely recognizable, and his case instantly caught the attention of mainstream media. Although the police chief denied the fact that any unlawful force was used on him, Christopher Zarella, a state police detective who assisted in Esteban's arrest, admitted throughout the trial that he had struck Esteban 3 times in the face, breaking a few bones in the process. The FBI also launched an investigation on this matter and concluded that the most contributing factor to his injuries was his jumping through the third-floor window. June 27, 2006. A jury found Carpio guilty of the murder of Detective Allen and the stabbing of Gatta. He was handed a life sentence for both crimes. And although the case of Esteban is truly disturbing, nothing can prepare your mind for this next convict. Number 14. Leonid Graser. That was 18-year-old Leonid trying to escape during his trial for the murder of his sister. The trial took place at Sherbinsky District Court in Moscow, Russia. In 2019, Graser shared an apartment with his sister, Ariada Karol. They both had what you would call a perfect relationship, but along the line, Graser blurred that line between reality and hallucination by claiming Satan possessed him and told him to kill her. Neighbors were alarmed hearing Ariada screaming down the hallway of the apartment building, where her body was then found, having sustained multiple stab wounds. By the time the cops were called, Graser was caught at the scene of the murder playing naked to her dead body, while he drew demonic symbols on his head using his sister's blood. Now, during his trial, shocked bailiffs watched him struggling to squeeze his body through a tiny space of the box where he was kept. They approached him and asked what he was doing, and he responded by saying, "Nothing." Then he would go and try slipping his body through a small space at the roof of the box and into the ceiling. It all happened so fast that he almost got away with it. They beat his legs with batons, yet it wasn't effective enough to bring him down. Thankfully, one of the bailiffs had a firm grip on one of his legs, allowing another bailiff to use a taser to bring him down. Once he was down, Graser went on to make a full confession, stating how killing her was a ritual to get rid of Satan possessing him and how it needed to be done.
Said he had no regrets about what he did.
You don't really need a soothsayer telling you that Graser needed some sort of mental evaluation for all this. However, another convict who warrants a mental evaluation for turning a courtroom into a WWE ring is Sayel Angala. April 21st, 2014. Tongan Crips member Sayel Angala stood up during his trial, took his attorney's pen, and jumped over the witness stand to attack a fellow gang member in chains. Angala was in court for a 2010 indictment on assault, conspiracy, robbery, and weapons offenses. Now, Angala was one of 17 people named in the 2010 indictment against Tongan Crip members. He was the last defendant in the case to stand trial, with previous defendants being given between 10 and 30 years in prison. On the flip, the footage released showed Angala sprinting towards the witness and leaping over with a pen in his right hand. The man jumped back to avoid being hit as Angala fell feet first over the front of the witness stand. Then we have the U.S. Marshal taking out his gun and shooting him 4 times. Somewhere around the corner, a woman cried out in horror, while other law enforcement in suits ran towards the witness stand. Angala's defense attorney jumped under the desk while prosecutors stood in shock. Angala was rushed to the hospital, but he died hours later from excessive blood loss. Now, here's where things get interesting. This video wasn't initially released to the public because it was sort of controversial. The majority of people in the courtroom that day believed the U.S. Marshal shouldn't have fired any shots. According to Angala's family attorney, Robert Sykes, he claims the U.S. Marshal shouldn't have shot him up to 4 times given that he wasn't holding a gun. Angala's parents also filed a wrongful death lawsuit in 2014, claiming he shouldn't have been shot because it was partially unreasonable, reckless, and constitutionally excessive. But as you might have guessed, Marshall was exonerated of all charges, with the FBI even reinstating that he was in good standing to have fired those shots. I mean, putting it into perspective, Angala got murdered while standing trial for assault. That's insane. And insane is the right word to categorize what the next defendant did to a judge while standing trial for murder. Number 12. Bass Webb. Did you see that? Let's play it again. That was the moment defendant Bass Webb spat on the judge presiding over his trial. July 31st, 2009. Bass Webb raped and murdered his girlfriend Bria Runowitz right in her home located in Cynthiana, Kentucky. Now, Bria was a 32-year-old Bourbon County jail employee who wanted to leave her job and start a new career. She had been studying law and was only 3 days away from starting her new job with the Department of Homeland Security. However, her boyfriend Bass cut her dream short and rendered her 2 kids motherless. She started dating Webb just 2 months prior to that incident, and it's unclear how the couple met. However, given her vocation and his many convictions for violent crimes and assaults, it's likely that they met while she was on the job, and Webb was either in jail or prison. Speaking of convictions, Webb had had so many of them, it's crazy how he hadn't gotten the death penalty. He's been charged for the death of his 2 former girlfriends, and was convicted on 2 counts of attempted murder for trying to run down a pretrial officer and a deputy sheriff while driving a geo-tracker outside the Bourbon County Jail in 2009. Plus, he was found guilty of 3rd-degree assault for spitting into the face of a correctional officer, Roy Compton, at Fayette County. Webb spat into his face after they looked for contraband in his cell. Jail staffers had suspected Webb might be holding broken CDs to use them as shivs. He waived his right to have a trial after pleading guilty to the murder of Bria Runowitz. If he hadn't, he would have probably gotten the death penalty. However, the eventual sentence he was handed wasn't any far less. Webb was given 50 years imprisonment for the murder of Bria, given another 10 years for spitting on that judge, and finally he was given a 15-year sentence for, again, spitting on the face of Officer Compton. And just when you think you can't top that bizarre moment in a courtroom, this next one physically attacked the judge for some disturbing reason. Number 11. Melissa Hardwick.
I haven't done anything to this court, haven't done anything to them.
She'll be arrested for contempt days for contempt of court. You go now.
July 13th, 2011. 45-year-old Melissa Hardwick from McCreary County was served 120 days of jail time on contempt of court charges after she attempted to attack a judge in family court. And she might have done some serious damage if she wasn't held back by the bailiffs. As we see, the judge was also a woman named Jennifer Upchurch Edwards, and this is exactly what happened. Hardwick and her ex-husband were in family court for a hearing on domestic violence charges. As the judge was looking over their documents filed in the case, Hardwick kept interrupting the proceeding and continued to be disruptive in the courtroom, even as the judge admonished her to be quiet. Hardwick would get so loud, bailiffs came over to handcuff her for contempt of court, but she still didn't stop. So as the judge was about to give her 10 days in jail, Hardwick dashed towards the bench in front of the judge and tried dragging her by her robe. Thankfully, 3 bailiffs stepped in to hold her back down. The judge wasn't injured, but Melissa suffered a few scratches to her face. The video was released online and instantly went viral. If we had TikTok back then, it would have gotten more traction. And it was obvious Melissa acted out of anger, but at the same time, attacking the judge wasn't the best idea to get a lighter sentence. To put this into context on how crazy it was, one of the court security officers, Adam Dotson, who helped to restrain Melissa, said he'd only seen such a thing occur in training and never in reality. Even the most ruthless criminals don't go just jumping a freaking judge. Anyways, after Melissa was taken out of the court, the judge informed Hardwick's ex-husband that another judge would be appointed to handle the domestic violence charges. On the flip, Melissa was charged with third-degree terroristic threatening, intimidating a participant in a legal process, and resisting arrest. Number 10. Erica Butts and Shenita Cunningham. November 4th, 2011. That was the state of Charleston's courtroom after 2 South Carolina women, Erica Butts and Shenita Cunningham, were sentenced to life for the death of a minor placed in their care. Back in 2009, the victim, Serenity Richardson, was visiting Erica, her godmother, and her mother's best friend. Shenita was Erica's lover, and they both lived together at their house in Somerville. Serenity's mom, Aisha Richardson, was moving out of South Carolina to Detroit, so she sent her daughter to live with these women for just 2 weeks. But they accidentally murdered her, if that makes any sense. According to their explanation, Serenity had a potty incident in their home, making them both beat her mercilessly. They whipped her with a belt and plastic coat hangers, leaving endless marks throughout her body. In the process, she died. When they found out she wasn't responding, they made things worse by putting bleach up her nose and putting ice on her to revive her. What were they thinking? We really don't know, but by the time paramedics arrived, little Serenity was already dead. August 2011, Erica entered an Alford plea, simply meaning she maintains her innocence but acknowledges that taking her case to trial would likely result in a conviction, while Shenita pled guilty. Now, what about the little girl's mother? Well, she was also in court, and there was really nothing she could do but feel disappointment and hate towards herself for trusting Erica to take care of her child, meaning she maintains her innocence but acknowledges that taking her case to trial would likely result in a conviction, while Shenita pled guilty. Now, what about the little girl's mother? Those were the judge's last words before sentencing both women to life imprisonment. Erica and Shenita collapsed to the ground immediately after that sentence was read out, while Erica's mother had to be physically thrown out of the court due to her screams and wailing at the back. Both women had to be picked up and wheeled out of the court. Number 9. Calvin Lloyd Griffith. Now that was 30-year-old Calvin, twerking in the face of justice during his bond hearing in August 2016. A few days prior to this, Calvin entered the Miami-Dade County Public School, snuck into an open office, and stole keys belonging to this car. He then went out into the parking lot and drove away with that car. The incident was reported to the police, and surveillance footage from the school was used to identify and arrest Griffith later. This guy was given burglary, petite theft, grand theft auto, and trespassing in a school safety zone. But it was during his first court appearance that Griffith decided to, twerk. A few minutes before that, his microphone was turned off after he foolishly tried telling the whole court that he smokes weed and cocaine.
Okay. Oh, yeah, anyway, because I smoke weed and cocaine.
Now, he didn't know his mic was cut off, so he kept talking. And when he noticed the judge presiding over the hearing, Judge Catherine Pooler, wasn't paying any attention, he began twerking. The court busted out in laughter as the judge looked in his direction, unimpressed with his skills. And in addition to twerking, Griffin yelled that his mother was there, seeing that he was on the court cam. His mother was in fact present in the court, and she was with a bag of medication, which he had reportedly stopped taking. But apparently his twerking skills didn't get him too far because his bond was set at $18,500, with the judge telling him to never return to that high school. The judge was clearly not impressed with Calvin's actions, and so was this next judge on hearing the disgusting words the defendant had to say in her courtroom. Number 8. Ronnie ONeal.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
That was the moment when Ronnie ONeal entered a guilty plea in one of the most horrifying incidents imaginable. March 18, 2018, in Riverview, Florida, 29-year-old ONeal committed a series of heinous acts. He fatally shot his ex-girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, before subjecting his daughter, Renivia ONeal, to unspeakable violence and ultimately killing her with an axe. 11:43 p.m. A distressing 911 call was made by a woman in apparent agony. While it's not accurate to say that the police ignored the call, it did take 8 long minutes until Ronnie himself called back, prompting him to take action. Ronnie, an African-American, claimed during his call that he had been attacked by white demons, falsely implicating Kenyatta as the aggressor. He provided the police with his address, and they arrived at his apartment at 11:49 p.m., just a minute after his call. Upon their arrival, they saw Kenyatta unconscious in the yard, their daughter brutally murdered, and Ronnie's son wounded by a knife and bleeding profusely. Ronnie proceeded to commit further atrocities by setting their house on fire. It was really a horrific and chaotic scene. However, Ronnie would not go quietly. He resisted arrest, necessitating the cops to use tasers on him before he could be handcuffed and taken into custody. Now, after spending more than 3 years at the Hillsborough County Jail, Ronnie was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated child abuse, 1 count of arson, and 1 count of resisting a law enforcement officer. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences plus an additional 90 years. At that point, it became evident that he would never experience freedom again. But the judge, deeply affected by the case and Ronnie's lack of remorse, felt compelled to confront Ronnie directly about the kind of man he had become.
19 years I've been at this job. I've seen human beings killed at the hands of others in every way imaginable. This is the worst case I have ever seen.
In the end, Ronnie's words were mean, and it's hard to fathom how unremorseful he was. Another defendant showing a similar demeanor in court was this guy, T.J. Lane.
Saying pull the trigger that killed your son, masturbates to memory of you.
You've probably seen that video 1,000 times online, but what exactly happened there? February 27th, 2012, Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, became the tragic scene of a shooting incident involving 6 students, with 3 dying. The perpetrator behind this harrowing event was a boy named T.J. Lane. Born on September 19, 1994, Thomas Michael T.J. Lane attended Lake Academy, an alternative school in Ohio, catering to students with special needs. However, on this fateful day, TJ brought a concealed .22 cal handgun to school and opened fire on his fellow classmates. March 1st, 2012. Lane was formally charged as an adult with 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. During his sentencing, TJ made a shocking gesture by removing his dress shirt to reveal a white t-shirt bearing the handwritten word, "Killer." Despite receiving 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, he displayed an unsettling lack of remorse. He further garnered attention by flipping his finger at the victim's parents and uttering an offensive statement. As a consequence of his actions, T.J. Lane and his family faced severe repercussions. Initially, the parents of the deceased students filed a wrongful death suit against Lane's family, resulting in a $2.7 million settlement. Additionally, on September 11, 2014, Lane managed to escape from the Allen Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio, alongside 2 older inmates. However, he was recaptured within 24 hours and subsequently transferred to a high-security U.S. Supermax prison, where he would be in solitary for up to 23 hours a day. Currently, he remains incarcerated in a similar Supermax prison just like the notorious ADX Florence facility. Number 6. Daniel Villegas.
Verdict Form B. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Unlike the other videos we've gone over so far, this is the only one that has some kind of positivity to it. That was 41-year-old Daniel Villegas, charged with capital murder in the 1993 deaths of Armando "Mando" Lazo and Bobby England. April 10, 1993, Armando, Bobby, and 2 other boys were walking home from a high school house party when they were shot at. England died near a ditch in the area, while Lazo went to a nearby home and knocked on a door before collapsing. The other 2 teenagers, Juan Carlos Medina and Jesse Hernandez, survived that shooting. Now, at the time, Villegas was just 16 years old and was arrested in connection to this shooting. At the time of his arrest, Villegas claimed that he was coerced by El Paso detectives to confess to that murder. He didn't have an attorney and didn't have his parents present, so he did as he was asked. And although he tried recanting that statement a few hours later, it became a huge piece of evidence for his conviction. In 1994, he underwent his initial trial, which ultimately ended in a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a unanimous verdict. During his subsequent trial, a year later, Villegas was found guilty of capital murder by a jury and subsequently received a life sentence in prison. However, after serving more than 17 years behind bars, the verdict was retracted and Villegas was released in January 2014 on bond. Within that time period, he got married and became a father of 2 children. Unfortunately, a third trial was opened for the same case, and if he was found guilty, he'd be getting to spend the rest of his life behind bars. During the trial, they didn't have DNA, forensic evidence, or a firearm connecting him to the murder. This obviously led the jury to reach a not guilty verdict, and as you saw, he cried uncontrollably throughout that video. He was ultimately exonerated after serving an 18-year prison sentence for a crime he did not commit. Number 5. Jeremy Christian. So Jeremy here is a member of the KKK, that white supremacist organization in the US. They have an issue with a lot of things, especially minorities like African Americans, Hispanics, Jews, and the list goes on. May 2017, Jeremy was handed life in prison for the murder of 2 passengers on a MAX train. He fatally stabbed these victims after verbally abusing 2 teenage girls, one African American and another immigrant from Somalia. According to a witness, Christian unleashed a hateful tirade, targeting Muslims, Christians, Jews, and even spoke of beheadings before yelling, "Go home, we need Americans here." One commuter, Namke Meche, attempted to record the incident with his phone, which Christian vehemently opposed. He forcefully took his phone, threw it on the ground, and smashed it with his shoe. This altercation escalated into a physical confrontation, during which Jeremy pulled out a knife, resulting in the fatal stabbing of Namke Meche and a 53-year-old bystander named Ricky Best. Initially during his trial, Jeremy appeared remorseful and emotional, seemingly attempting to garner sympathy from the judge. However, his true colors came out when he verbally abused that same African-American girl he had targeted on the train, making threats, derogatory remarks, and expressing regret that he had not killed her.
I should have killed her. Everybody knows you're alive. Everybody knows you're alive.
And that was all the judge needed to hand this man a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Ellis Nelson Ortiz Neves. December 2017, Elson Ellis was convicted for the killing of his girlfriend's son, Giovanni Mayes, whom he was living with and taking care of at the time. Ellis and the boy's mother, Sonia Hernandez, began dating a year before the incident, and Ortiz would eventually meet Giovanni and Hernandez's other children. However, upon meeting her children, Ortiz started abusing Giovanni, and on June 13, 2017, Giovanni died from this abuse. It wasn't only Ortiz who was to blame in this case. The boy's mother was also involved, as they both maltreated Giovanni beyond human comprehension. On the day he died, Ortiz had beat him to the point where he was semi-conscious, lying on the kitchen floor of their home and suffering from internal bleeding. At his sentence hearing, Ortiz Neves continued to protest his innocence, claiming he didn't abuse or fatally injure Giovanni, but instead he was trying to help him. Ellis also flared up as the judge reviewed evidence at trial that resulted in his conviction of felony murder. He couldn't bear to hear the words the judge called him.
The testimony showed that you put this child and other childs in a...
Sheriff deputies had to step in and lead him out into the courtroom hallway. By the time he returned, Ortiz Neves was more calm while the judge finished his sentencing. The judge presiding over the case, Judge Mark Trusick, gave Ellis a mandatory life in prison without the chance for parole for the murder, and 80 to 150 years in prison for first-degree child abuse. The judge's final words to Ellis were, "You are the lowest form of human life. You are a monster, and quite frankly, you're evil. You should never be allowed out of prison. You will die in the prison system." On the flip side, the child's mother wasn't vindicated from the death of her son. She was sentenced to 57 months to 10 years in jail after being found guilty of second-degree child abuse and perjury. She seemed to show some remorse at her sentencing, saying, "I lied under oath for a man I thought loved and cared for me." Number 3. Ricky Hand.
You just gave him 4 years. Well, guess what? Sir, no citizen,
That was 46-year-old Ricky Hand launching his poo grenade in court after the judge handed him a 40-year sentence. Hand's reaction to that sentence was shocking, not only because of that funny smile on his attorney's face the moment he brought out feces in a bottle, but because this wasn't Hand's first run-in with the law. You see, he'd previously served prison time after he pleaded guilty in a robbery case back in October 2011. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for that crime. Then he was released on parole for less than 6 months before he began another crime spree in January 2016. He was eventually caught a second time and charged to court for a series of robberies across Springfield, Ohio. He faced 30 charges of breaking and entering, aggravated robbery, abduction, and attempted safecracking. However, before that sentencing, the court deputies had received intel that Hand was planning to throw his urine and feces at the judge in court. That made the court get some extra deputies for help, but the biggest mistake they made was that they didn't search Hand before he entered the courtroom. Moments before the incident escalated, Hand inquired once more from the judge about his 40-year prison sentence. Upon getting that confirmation from the judge, he discreetly retrieves containers filled with his own bodily waste from his arm sling. His attorney reacted swiftly with a corny smile on his face, though Hand's discharge still managed to soil his suit. Subsequently, 4 deputies rushed forward to restrain him, but they too ended up getting splattered by the waste. Later on, this man admitted to hiding several bottles of his own urine and feces on his body, and as a result of his courtroom antics, he now faces an extra 5 counts of harassment with bodily substances, 1 for his attorney and 4 for the deputies. Number 2. Tanner Jacobson and Cody Howard. They say not all heroes wear capes, and I bet you'll agree with that statement after you see what this brave judge did in his courtroom. October 16th, 2018. 2 inmates, Jacobson and Howard, were in court for driving with suspended licenses and other crimes. The judge presiding over their case, Judge R.W. Buzzard, sentenced them both to 30 days in county jail for this. But in a split of a second, Cody and Tanner bolted from the courtroom and ran down the halls while still in handcuffs. On the other hand, the judge, left with no option, had to take off his robe and chase after him. Howard was in the lead, but his sandals came off, making him fall on his face in the hallway outside the courtroom. He managed to get back up while Jacobson ran past him. Then they jumped down several flights of stairs before kicking open a fire exit that led outside. But the judge, R.W. Buzzard, managed to catch on to Howard before he could get far. And Jacobson was also caught a few blocks away by court deputies. And if you're asking why they ran, well then, here's your answer.
It was just a split-second, decision. I don't even know why I did it. I would be out of here if I wouldn't have ran.
Looking at this case in retrospect, it seems quite funny, but in reality, it's so mind-blowing that these 2 guys could just run out of court. And big kudos to the judge for his immediate response. From the intended 30 days in county jail, Cody Howard was given 3 years imprisonment for first-degree trafficking and stolen property, third-degree theft, and second-degree escape, while Tanner Jacobson was handed a 1-year sentence for second-degree escape. Now, those escape charges against the 2 drew international attention after a video of their dramatic escape attempt went viral online. National and international media outlets got a hold of that video, making the judge somewhat of an online celebrity, as he was given interview requests from the New York Post, Good Morning America, Inside Edition, and Seattle and Portland news outlets. What a way to make a name for yourself as the baddest judge on the planet. And number 1, Michael Madison. May 31st, 2016. The father of one of 3 victims of Ohio serial killer Michael Madison leaped over a table to attack the defendant in court after the judge pronounced a death sentence on him. Shortly before the courtroom incident, the father, Van Terry, had approached the podium to address the judge and speak about the impact of his daughter's loss. Terry then paused and turned to look behind him at Madison, who was sitting at the defense table. Madison smirked at Terry, making him get all furious and jump over that table to attack him. Before he can get in a few punches, the deputies wrestled him away, and the courtroom burst into chaos. Madison wasn't injured from that attack, and Terry was dragged out of the courtroom. Now, Terry's daughter, Sherelda Terry, was among two other women, Angela Deskins and Shatisha Shealy, who were found in July 2013 near the East Cleveland apartment building where Madison lived. Madison told the police he strangled two of them, but couldn't remember killing the third. After the outburst, the court proceedings resumed, and thankfully, Van Terry wasn't handed any charges for contempt of court.